Okay, I hope everybody is able to see my screen.
Yes, sir.
Today, being the last class, I would like to show you how to gain root access to a couple of machines or gain system level privileges. Essentially, demonstration of how to hack a computer. Again, as I always tell you, do not do this on the internet without an engagement, because law enforcement is always monitoring attacks, and you'll get into trouble with law if you were to violate any of the cybersecurity laws of any country, even in India. So for serious people who want to get into penetration testing and ethical hacking, so this is the Sandbox Lab. It's called hackthebox.com. It will cost you about 1,000 rupees per month for subscription. But if you are really serious about practicing ethical hacking, this is the website I will recommend. You will have the resources here to practice on like weak vulnerable missions. I will give you the exact link in the chat. Oops, sorry, don't go there. For some reason. Okay, here it is, hackthebox.com. So I'll allow it to load. Authenticated. Okay. Still trying to load. Okay. So this is where you might typically want to start with practicing penetration testing and ethical hacking skills. And as I told you, you will have labs over here. You'll have guided tutorials, and you also have live machines, which are essentially like challenges, which you can go hack the machine, and there will be a flag, essentially a text file, which you can. Once you discover that file, it means you have gained highest privileges on the machine, and you can gain yourself some points. So there's what's called the active machines, and there's what's also called the retired machines. So active machines are usually, are those challenges, but you cannot, I cannot teach how to hack an active machine. That's the agreement. I can teach you how to hack a retired machine, right? So for class purposes, we can take a retired machine. I'll take a couple of very easy machines, and we'll see how to hack a couple of them. So once you purchase a subscription, it'll typically ask you to download a VPN file. And so go in here, open VPN. So you can select what country you want to VPN into. I'm assuming you're aware of what VPNs are. If you ever played a game, you'll know how to go, into a VPN server, connect through a proxy, and appear as if you're coming out of a different country, right? So similarly, for learning purposes, because we are located in India, it might help if you create that VPN connection to Singapore, SGU Singapore. So that will ensure we can, access the machine in a relatively easy manner. The latency is very small. If you were to choose a faraway country, you won't get the necessary, performance-wise from the network. So I've already downloaded this VPN file, and I have it on my desktop. So this is also, you use OpenVPN to access. So when you start ethical hacking, I truly recommend to download Kali Linux operating system. You can run it as a virtual machine. I have stated that before. I use Oracle VM VirtualBox, so that's the app I use. That helps you to deploy virtual machines. So you can download the file as such, and once you have Oracle VirtualBox installed, you can just say file or say new. Let's see. So you can create virtual machines, right? So you can select the operating system like Linux, and you can based on whatever operating system, you can select memory. So use an existing VHD file, or you can create a virtual hard disk. So this is, you have the tutorials available how to deploy a Kali Linux virtual machine, on your desktop. So you can go through those tutorials. Once you have Kali Linux installed, then it becomes much easier, to kind of do these kind of labs. Let me go back. So I have the OS here again. So there is what you call a terminal. So you can access it from the top, or you can say a terminal emulator. So it gives you that command prompt. Okay. View. I can zoom this in. Okay. I hope you can see my screen well. Okay. So where am I? So in Linux, the command to display all files is ls. So I'm right now having my VPN file on my desktop. So I'm going to change desktop. And this is the command. Before that, let me look at my IP address. The command is ifconfig. So I have 10.02.15. Okay, so this is how it's connected to the internet. So this is the loopback address. No worries there. So what happens when I connect to a VPN? So this is the command, open VPN, and the VPN file you download. Okay, connected to the lab. So now if I try to say ifconfig, you can see I have an additional IP address created. So this IP address is what has connected me to the Hack the Box site. Okay, it's connected me to a network where we have all these virtual machines. So once I connect, this part here will refresh. I'm going to work for it. Okay, so it shows green on my right side. Okay, so now I can launch a machine. Okay, so let's launch Lame. So Lame is a machine we're going to hack. I'm going to click on spawn this machine. It'll take a couple of minutes to spin up. Okay, shows active here. Once that machine is online, we'll give you the IP address. You can connect to the machine. So it's 10.10.10.3. So if I reach out 10.10.10.3, I do a ping to test the connectivity, and I'm able to receive a response. So this is good. So I'm on the lab network. I'm able to reach, oops, for some reason it shows unreachable. Okay, I have my VPN. Okay, let's try connecting to it another way. I've told you that, all machines or systems have ports listening on them, right? So my machine has an IP address, and there is what's called a port number, and a port number pertains to a certain service it's listening on, and it'll look for network connections on those ports. So depending on what port number it's listening on, you might be able to infer what kind of service it's running, whether it's running a web service, whether it's running a file sharing service, and so on and so forth. So there is a tool that can look for ports on a remote machine. Okay, so that tool is called Nmap. Okay, this is an open source tool. It is used by security researchers and attackers to perform reconnaissance, to kind of scan through all the ports that a machine is listening on, to find out, what kind of service it's listening. So if it's listening on a vulnerable service, we might be able to exploit and hack the machine. So that's how a remote hack would typically start, is doing reconnaissance, looking for what the machine is listening on the network. Okay, so the command is nmap -a. So -a means, scan all services. I'm using T4. T4 means it's a throttling limit. Like T1 is less aggressive, and T4 means, perform a high aggressive scan. Attackers will use something less aggressive because they don't want to be detected, right? They want to look like normal traffic in your network. So this is just our lab. So I'm using an aggressive scan. So I'm looking for top ports 100. So this is just a switch that'll essentially tell me, scan what the most, common ports are, like web services, file sharing services, FTP. Sorry, I got disconnected. Is everybody able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sharing my screen once again. I hope you're able to see my screen. I was halfway through completing my nmap command for scanning ports. So I specified -e turn 0, which means my lab connection. Next, I'm going to specify my victim's IP address. So there's 10.10.10.3. -pn essentially means, don't attempt to test whether that machine is reachable or not, because sometimes when we are connected to a remote country, the latency is too long. So the scan might think that, okay, the destination is not reachable. So the first thing the scan does is does a ping scan. So that's what we did as well. So we did, I'm sorry, ping 10.10.10.3. So this is the IP address. So it showed us that kind of the destination was unreachable. So we're going to trying to say override that and see if we can scan it. Hit enter. And it will start scanning for the top 100 well-known ports listening on this IP address. So this will take a few minutes to get done, depending on how aggressive you want to scan. If you do not specify anything over here, it'll scan all like 65,000 ports. So you might want to tailor down if you want to save on time. Because I know this host machine is vulnerable to certain well-known ports, I just say top 100. So it's still doing its scan. Okay, now I get a response. It is working. Because I am on the same network as the victim machine, it is typically easy to kind of get the list of services. This is really difficult if you are sitting external to an organization's network and you're trying to discover ports. Typically, you will only be able to access what's exposed to the internet, and there will be like firewalls and all intrusion prevention, intrusion detection systems in between. So getting through those defenses is really difficult for an attacker. So what attackers will typically do is, they will try to get into the organization's network first. So they'll try to get legitimate credentials, and they somehow will try to get into an organization's network and then perform the reconnaissance, because organization networks are typically trusted. Like when you have a computer within your organization network, you tend to trust it, you give it more privileges. So attacking from within the organization is really easy. Like it's no knowledge, like you have seen many movies. That's the same way attackers will work as well. They'll, instead of doing a remote scan from the internet, trying to go through all the firewalls and all the security, controls, they will try to first get into our organization using legitimate credentials, and then they will try to hack a computer without anybody knowing. Okay, so performing all these types of scans will typically trip all security scanners, right? Our organization security controls will be looking for, if they have a really good security setup, they will listen for these type of scans. Okay, so they'll get alarms. So the attackers will try to be as stealthy as possible. So if in a typical organization, if you run this command, you will surely get caught. Okay, our Nmap scans have resulted in showing us that we have port 21 open, and that relates to the file transfer protocol. Okay, that's cool. Okay, it's open to anonymous FTP login, which means that you don't need credentials to log in through the FTP service. And it also shows us they have port 22 open, which is SSH. So SSH is used to remotely administer machines on the network. You SSH into a server and you can actually go into the server and perform whatever administrative or work you need to do. So that's also really good. We have ports 139 and 445 open, which is also good. 445 is used for file sharing. 139 does the same thing as well. So give me one. Okay, so it also says the OS is Unix, so it might be a Linux machine, Unix-based machine. So that'll give us some knowledge as to how to attack the machine. Now, what we do for Windows will be different from what we do to Linux. Okay, so that's why you need to have an understanding of these two major operating systems. So depending on whether it's a Windows operating system or a Unix or Linux-based operating system, your attack technique will vary really widely. So knowing what operating system you're getting into is kind of crucial to take the next step. Okay. Okay, supported. Okay, there are some things about how file sharing is done. So SMB is typically file sharing. So this is good. We have the information we need to, go to the next step. Okay. So it's told that we have FTP service open, right? So let's try connecting to it. FTP 10.10.10.3. Okay, it's asking for a name. I'm going to type anonymous. Anonymous is a default name that's used when you don't have to provide your credentials. Okay, so I didn't have to enter any password, but it let me in. So let's see what's in there. So ls FTP is a command, or it's an application that's used to share files. Typically, if you go into an FTP server, you must find a list of files or something that's critical. Yeah, I showed you in the web hacking tutorial last week, right? Web services. So we were able to go into an FTP site and we were able to retrieve a sensitive document. So similarly, if you have an FTP site, you might expect to look at how to either retrieve files, or you could upload malware to it and then go further inside. For now, there are no files. I did an ls and it doesn't seem to do anything over here. Okay, there is nothing sensitive. So I'm just going to exit. And I'm also going to remember, this is reconnaissance, right? So you're going to go through some trial and errors before you even find anything. So what typically I show you within like 10 minutes over here might take you like a couple of hours to kind of go through each setting and see if it's vulnerable and what you can do with any service. So I'm just going straight away to what's vulnerable over here. So it shows me that it has a file share open, okay? So I'm going to try to connect to that file share. The command for it it's called SMB client. So I'm going to use a format which will allow me to connect to the share. So this is typically how you will connect to it. So it's called SMB client. -L means list all the shares, all the file shares. And you use this type of formatting to connect to, because that's how we typically connect to file shares. If you start working, for a company, you'll be familiar with the syntax of how to connect to file shares, how to retrieve files on the from a remote server and all those things. So I'm just going to hit enter. Okay, it's asking me for a password. So I'm going to check if it allows me to log in without a password. So I'm going to hit enter again. It does. Okay, and it lists what shares are available for accessing. So admin dollar is a really interesting share. If you can get into admin dollar, it means you might be able to get into the admin section of the particular machine. So let's try, right? Okay. Let me see. Admin. Okay. Got it. Okay. We're gonna try without the hyphen L. Okay. It says access denied, so I'm not able to connect to the admin dollar folder. Okay. I'm going to see if I can connect to, okay. I can connect to IPC dollar. Okay, I'm not able to perform any commands over there. So it's denying access. Okay. So let me exit out of this. So it does not by default allow me to get into the machine through the remote shares. Now, what's interesting is the version of the service that's running. So it's saying it's running Samba 3.0.20. So Samba is kind of an interface for Linux machines. It's a service that allows Windows machines to connect to Linux machines using like a file share mechanism. So we got it, we can check if there is a vulnerability associated with it. Okay. The easiest way to do this, a command called msf console. This launches what's called Metasploit. So Metasploit is a software that's used for exploiting or hacking into machines. It takes a couple of minutes. So it allows you to kind of search for exploits that are readily available as scripts for you to run and hack into a server. Again, you typically running this in a live environment will trip a lot of things, but it gives you an idea of how to use an exploit, how to deploy payloads. You can get a lot of information out of this software. So I'm starting the Metasploit framework console. So you can research more about this. So it's called Metasploit. Okay. I am in the Metasploit console. I'm going to do a search for Samba. Okay, so it gives me the list of exploits and scans that are available for Samba version. So I'm interested in this one, the first one, right? That I've highlighted over here, the exploit multi-Samba user map script. So it allows code execution, command execution. And let's research about this. So simple, it's simple, right? You can just Google search for the exploit and you can actually find more details about it. Again, this is all trial and error. It takes a while for you to, kind of go through all these exploits, tell them if it's applicable or not. Because I've already done this, I'm just selecting what's readily available. Okay, the Samba username map script command execution. This module exploits command execution vulnerability in Samba versions 3.0.2. Okay, 3.0.20. And we'll go back and look at our. Sorry, my kid is here. So we also see that the Samba version is 3.0.20. So the versions match, and let's see what it does. By specifying username containing shell meta characters, attackers can execute arbitrary commands. Okay, no authentication is needed to exploit this vulnerability, since this option is mapped to usernames prior to authentication. So what this tells me is, without authentication, if I use this exploit, given the Samba versions that this machine appears to run, I might be able to exploit it. Okay, very well. So going back into the Metasploit module, I'm going to use give me 1 second here, guys.
I want to put the number if you want a gas number.
Sorry, guys. Emergency. Okay. I'm going to use the exploit. So the command that I used to type is, it's saying, okay, I'm going to copy this off. Copy selection, use. So once I type in the exploit name, so it will let me into that particular folder, and I type in options. So when I type in options, it'll give me what parameters you have to use in order to be able to deploy the exploit. Okay. So our hosts is typically means what the IP address of the target machine is. Local host is my computer. And what this does is it will attempt to create for me a shell, a command prompt, wherein it'll look like I have already logged in to the remote machine. So it'll create a remote shell on my local machine. Okay. So I have to specify exactly what the target should be. So that's all I need to specify. So other things are automatically populated because this exploit works that way. So depending on the exploit, you might have to add different parameters, but this is a relatively easy exploit. So it only asks for the IP address. Okay, so I'm going to say set our hosts is 10.10.10.3. So which is the IP address of the target machine. Okay, so it has already set. So if I go into options once again, it shows me, I will populate it. So it was blank previously, and it has the IP address now. So everything is ready. All I have to do is type in exploit. Okay. So my machine is listening on this IP address on this port number. So this exploit, oops, didn't create a session. Okay. So this exploit will try to create a shell for me on the remote machine, and it will give me the command prompt over here. So I'm assuming that's because the IP address is not my lab IP address. So I'm going to say the host is my lab IP address. Exploits are always not reliable. Sometimes your network, your VPN connection, everything can get in the way. Okay, I think it created a session. So once I changed my IP address to the actual interface that's connected to the lab, I was able to create a session. So it says command shell opened. Now, I'm going to type who am I? That's a command that's typically used to see what level of privileges you have. And it says root, which means I have the highest level of privileges on this machine. That is 10.10.10.3. That's my target machine. If I type ls, I can pretty much go into whatever, like boot is a very sensitive folder. For example, I think I can go there /boot. Yeah. Okay, so I have access to all the system config files. So typically this means I have full control of the machine. So what I've demonstrated here is, again, a very easy exploit. So this is how we kind of work towards hacking a machine. Usually you won't get root privileges straight away. You will get into a machine, then you might figure out you're logged into as a normal user, and then you go search for a vulnerability that will allow you to elevate your privileges, and you can go from there. So once you get that remote shell, then it means you're done. So in typical environments, right, attackers will not look for hacking a single machine. They will need control of the full environment, right? It helps that most organizations' networks are in what's called a domain. It's a bit of a complex topic for at this level, but just remember, like a domain is like a governance model for all your networks. And highest privileges for a domain is domain admin. Attackers will try to get hold of the credentials for the domain admin. So once you have that credentials, once you elevate your privileges to that level on the network, you can do anything on the network. So when I talk about ransomware attacks, right, where attackers typically encrypt all your PCs, that happens only after attackers can gain the domain admin privileges. So domain admin is an admin for the entire network, all the computers. And this is how it'll look like. So they'll try to get in, do reconnaissance, use an exploit, then try to elevate. Once they have domain admin, it's done. When you're a penetration tester, your goal would typically be to get the domain admin credentials. So if you hit that, your pen test is done. Any questions? No? Okay. If you have time, I can show you another machine, but if you are going for lunch, that's okay. I hope you got some knowledge out of this. Any questions? Okay. Do you guys have time for another hack? Or are you guys out?
We have time, sir.
Have time? Okay, good. Okay, so let's look at another machine. It's too slow. Okay, let me stop this machine. Hack the box typically allows only one machine to be alive at a time. So we got to terminate this instance before we can create another one. Okay, it's gone. So let's look at another machine. Let me search. Okay, there is a machine called Jerry, which I like to hack as well. Let's exit out of this. Okay, I have an IP address, 10.10.10.95. Okay, so what is the first step? First step is to do an Nmap scan to find out what's available for us to hack into. 95. Oh, where is it? So let's just wait for a couple of minutes. Okay. So only one port is open, 8080. So it's everything else is closed. So this is the only option for us. But the service is a HTTP service, which means it's running a web service. We'll explore it, right? HTTP 10, 10, 1095. And again, it's important to specify the port because HTTP by default works on port 80. We have port 8080, so we have to specify the port in our HTTP command. Okay, it loaded a web page. It is the default web page for Apache Tomcat. Apache Tomcat is a web service. Okay, so it's like when you have a server, you will run your application on top of a typical web service. So it might be IIS, Internet Information Services for Windows. That's where you'll deploy all your code, and that's what will render your website to the end user. Similarly, for Linux, it's usually Apache Tomcat. Okay, it is not a good practice to have the configuration page for Apache Tomcat left open. So that's what's happened here. If you have the configuration page, what the attacker can use exploits to get into the admin section of your web page, and they might be able to deploy malware. Okay, that's what we are going to do now. Okay. So, if you want, you can click on the different things and see how things are configured. But my interest is to get into the manager section. Okay. I'm trying different things. Okay, it says access denied. I tried admin. Okay, I think it's saving my cookies. Okay. Anyways, what do we do next? So we'll launch our famous burp suite software. I'll get this from desktop. I showed this to you during our web hacking classes. It allows us to kind of look for what's going on as far as web requests are concerned. It takes a couple of minutes. Okay. So as I showed you previously, it has an inbuilt browser. It allows us to intercept traffic without having to configure a proxy. I'm just waiting for the browser to open. I have it already here. Ignore this one. This one is from my Kali Linux machine. Okay, intercept is on. Switching off intercept. Sorry guys, this is a bit slow. Okay, it loaded the web page. Hopefully we have the response here. Okay. So I'm going to try to get in the manager app once again and see what it does, right? So burp suite will be able to intercept the traffic. Okay, so I'm going to say admin, going to give my password 12345. I'll hit sign. Okay, it's not allowing me, but I have the responses and burp suite. Okay, it pretty much says 401 unauthorized as a response. I'm looking at where my username and password is getting passed, right? I hit admin 12345. It doesn't show me anywhere here in plain text. But it has what's called an authorization request that goes in and says basic, and it has a string over here. So I'm thinking this, my username and password is being encoded. So encoded is to convert it into a different text format. So I'm going to right click, highlight on the string, right click, and I'm going to send it to what's called the decoder. So decoder is again a feature within Burpsuit. It allows you to decode strings. So you can select what to decode it as. So it's like octal, binary, ASCII, base64. And I know from a brief glance that having an equal to sign is at the end of a string means usually base 64, okay? And I'm trying to, decode as 64. Okay. When I decode, it gives me the text in plain string. So what this means is my admin and my password gets passed on with a colon. I don't know if you can actually see this, but there is actually a colon in between these two. So what that tells me is if I were to brute force logins, I have to make sure I have a colon between my username and password. Okay. How do we get our default brute forcing done? Right. So let me go into Google once again. Everything is available in Google, right? I'm going to search for Apache Tomcat user. Taking some time here. Let me do this on my host machine. Hopefully it's faster. Okay, there it is. I already have it. Okay, here it is. So now I have to just make sure I convert it into an agreeable format. I'm using Excel. That's the easiest way. You can use scripts. Okay, I have the list over here. And I have to concatenate username and password. Okay, so now I have it in the format that I need. Let me see if the paste works. Sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to go into Burpsuit. I think I'm using too much of my system resources. It's really slow. Close this one out. Okay. Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys. So this was my GET request, and I'm going to send it to intruder. So remember, we did this already in our previous session, right? So now I have positions. For positions, I need to brute force this aspect here, the string. So I'm declaring it as a variable, adding the dollar symbol will pretty much guarantee only this string is being brute forced. Now let's see if I can paste the payload. Okay, it did, thankfully. Okay, now I have all my strings in place. I'm going to start the attack. Okay. So I'm looking for a different HTTP response. It's all 401s. So I don't have a different username or different response. Let me quickly check this out. Typically, this works. Okay. Okay, I think I missed a setting. Let's see once again. See, no. I have to uncheck this box. I think it's again, doing another encoding of whatever I sent. Let me start the attack. let me do this manually, right? Okay. For some reason, I couldn't brute force the correct combination of username and password. So I might be missing something over here. But basically, this is it. So if you, what's the attack? Okay. So for this combination of username and password, okay. Sorry, guys, I couldn't actually show you the brute forcing. Okay, now I'm in the manager section of the web server. So if you look at the options I have the ability to deploy what's called a WAR file. So it's a web archive file used by Apache Tomcat to deploy actual web applications. As you can see, you have different application paths. All these are like, different WAR files. So because it has the ability to deploy a WAR file for me, I'm going to deploy a malicious application. Okay. So the command to do it, see, all this is available in the internet, right? So you don't have to worry that to remember it. If you search for it, you will find it. Okay, so this is it. MSF Venom. So this is specific for Apache, right? So this MSF Venom creates your malicious payload. And again, what I'm trying to do is creating that reverse shell. L host is again local host. I have to change my IP address. It's 23. I have to specify a local port address. I leave it as 449s. And file type is var. Output, I'm going to say rshell.var. Okay. So this is to just create that malicious. Okay. Copy this. So I'm going to open a terminal here. I'm going to paste. Okay. It takes a couple of minutes to create that malicious file. Okay, it created the malicious file for me. I'm going to go into the WAR file to deploy, and I'm going to choose this file. Open, deploy. So even before that, what I have to do is, I have to create that listener, which I forgot. So I showed you one way of doing it. One is using the Metasploit console. Another way is to use what's called netcat. So this creates that listener for you. 9. So I use netcat-nvlp. That's the standard command. I'm specifying a port of 4 nines because I have specified 4 nines here. And I also specify the interface. Okay, so this is 10.10. Sorry. 14.23. So it's starting that listen, okay? Now I have this malicious file that's telling that remote server to connect to this IP address at this port, which is my system's IP address and this port, okay? So I've deployed the file. What I'm going to do is I'm going to 10.10.488080. Oops. Slash. So if you look at it, it's our shell over here, right? So I'm going to say our shell. I've done something here. So nothing shows up as a web page, but look into my listener. I have the shell. Okay, if I type who am I? Okay, NT authority system. So system has the highest privileges in a Windows machine. Okay, so I know I'm dealing with a Windows machine over here. So with system privileges, again, I can pretty much do anything, right? So this should return the list of files. I can tracker, create a directory. So I can do pretty much whatever I want. So now I have full control of the victim machine. That's Jerry. So I hope you understood, the techniques I followed. I apologize if something got amiss, but let me know if you have any questions. That is all I had for today. And I think this will be our end of our cybersecurity fundamentals class. I encourage you to go out and practice all your skills. And if you are interested in cybersecurity, I've given you a basic foundation to start and go from here. Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Again, until next time, then. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll have a small vote of thanks, and we'll have one group also. Sahana,
Okay.
proceed.
Yes, sir. We would like to express our gratitude to the principal, correspondent, and the Department of IT for organizing this 10-day workshop on cybersecurity. Our special thanks to the guest of honor for his valuable time and content. Last but not the least, we would like to thank all the participants for their patience and cooperation. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful session we had last 1 month or so. I request a few of our students tell a feedback about this 10-hour cybersecurity classes, because you understand many things, you learn a lot of things through this 10 hours. I hope a few of them give some few feedback about these sessions. Can anyone?
It doesn't have to be positive. I tell you, you can tell me what I can improve on. If you didn't understand certain concepts clearly, I can refresh my material for my next sessions again.
Come on, guys. It's a time where you can talk and you can give some feedback about these sessions.
Sir, not only the theory part, the case studies that you showed us were also very useful and informative, sir. It is very easy to understand concepts with those case studies.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. And thank you for being active in the class. I appreciate your participation.
Thank you so much, sir.
Mithun is here. Mithun, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Can you say a few words about our sessions?
Yes, sir. So, in my last year, I did a project on ECC, sir, and I also mailed you on the first
Yes.
session, sir. So I could refer to half of the syllabus that you covered in this workshop, sir. And last year, in third year, we used to learn a subject called computer networks, sir. So it was full of theories, so I could not understand so much about the protocols and also. But in the middle sessions, you thought about the layers, application layer, and how it works in both sides, like in the sender and then the receiver side. So I could understand fully how that subject works uh, in our subjects also, sir. So I could understand clearly how a network works and receives mail that is encrypted and decrypted in both sides, sir. And you shared so many websites for us to practice and the way you presented that presentation using that notes and graphs, it was easy to understand, sir. The only thing, the feedback I used to say is that the time we had between for each class, so I forgot some of the
Yeah.
topics that we learned from the previous class. That's the only thing I have to say, sir. After that,
Yeah.
moreover, it was very good session, sir. It was very useful for my career also, sir. Thank you for your time and knowledge, sir.
Thank you, Mithun. I appreciate your feedback. These are the things I wished I learned when I came out of college. So that's what I wanted to teach you guys about. I agree. Like I also studied Anna University syllabus, and a lot of things were theoretical. I mean, we are engineers, and it's not anybody's fault, but they expect us to be experts in mathematics and theoretical aspects of engineering, right? But when it comes to work, it becomes entirely practical. And that's why we have this kind of gap between when you finish college and for you to be employable. Employers are looking at a really different view of how we learn things. They're expecting us to be practical in everything, to understand everything visually, but we mostly read theory and we try to get through our exams as our first priority. But I felt like if I can teach you some practical aspects, that will really help you to kind of sit through your interviews, and not only cybersecurity, because that's the reason why I went through all the basics, because I was asked only basic questions in my interview, and if I had to answer all of those things. And when I went to TCS, initial 3 months, they just trained us on all these practical things. So if you already know it, you already have that kind of leverage over all your competitive people. People will be from all over India, they'll be competing against you. And it gives you that edge a little bit, I hope. And I agree, the classes, I had to space them out because once I didn't have enough time, and for secondly, I didn't have all the material prior to starting your class. This is my first ever training for any student group. So every time after your class, I have to kind of sit and go through, prepare all my slides from scratch. And that's why I had to take the time that I needed to take. I apologize for it, but the next time when I do this, I think I have everything ready now, and I know the classes can be spaced within a very short period. But thank you again for the feedback. I appreciate all of you guys' participation. It was really nice to kind of go through these classes with you.
Thank you so much, sir. Today, I think Kishore is missing. Actually, what happened to him? Because he also very interested about this cybersecurity. He spoke with you, I think, isn't it, sir?
Yes. So
Yes, sir.
yeah, he's again trying to develop his e-commerce website, I assume. Well, that's a good start, right? When you don't have all what you need when you start off with these things to actually master a domain, like an entire web application stack, it will take many years. Okay, but if you're starting 1 year early, it gives you that edge. I appreciate. I don't know if he's successful yet or not, but doing the most successful people, my fellow students, my friends, are the people who started their projects like even in the second year, or even they have started exploring some aspects of coding or systems early in their college, right? They are the ones who are most successful now. I won't say I'm that category, but by any means, but I'm just telling you, comparatively speaking, people who kind of started off early, even though they didn't have it all figured out, but some, doing some labs on the side, learning some coding. Those people, even though they're not in the same stream, like people who learn code, I think they are managers now, they are MBAs, but the ability to focus and bring that level of commitment outside of your college and study hours is what helps ultimately. It's not your knowledge, but it's your ability to focus and give that push towards that extra 15-20% is what determines who's successful and who's not, who's average at the end of a career. So I appreciate him taking that step. And thank you, sir. Again, when I asked for this class, you really, you were really encouraging about it, and you brought me in touch with all your students. And I appreciate your time again.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you again for giving a wonderful time with us and given a lot of knowledge in the topic of cybersecurity. Like what Mithun said, we learn a lot of things about cybersecurity in cryptography and network security subject, but seeing in a practical way, it is totally different. So thank you so much for the lot of inputs you've given us. Thank you so much. Keep in touch with us, sir. Definitely will meet you in college one day. We'll have another session with the students. Thank you so much.
Maybe. Yeah, I'll keep in touch.
So we'll have one photograph, sir. We'll have a
okay, sir.
Group photo. I request all the students to be switch on your video, and we'll take a snap and we'll document this. Can all of you please? Can anyone log in with your laptop? Laptop login பண்ணிருக்கீங்களா? Anyone? Guys, can you switch on your video? If anyone laptop login பண்ணீங்கன்னா, you can take a snapshot or what, otherwise I will take it from my mobile phone. My laptop, it is not working actually. Yeah, switch on your video. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.